Hello, my name is Kevin Snyder for AE Touch Plus, and today we're going to be doing a tutorial integrating Cinema 4D with After Effects. So let's just start off with a preview of what we'll be creating. Okay, so just for a little overview here, the text is created in Cinema 4D. It's broken apart with a plugin called Thoraci. I textured it with Sketch and Tune, and then we're going to run an Espresso tag to export the position data of all the fragments, bring them into After Effects. All these lines that are attached to this point are created with the beam effect, and we're going to use a macro in Microsoft Word to help automate the process of attaching them to the fragments. Here we are in Cinema 4D. We're going to import a file for our logo. For our logo, we're going to use an Adobe Illustrator file. So in the Objects panel, I'm going to go to File and Merge Objects and select my Illustrator file. In order for it to import correctly, make sure you save it as version 8. Click Open. Scale comes up as 1. Click OK. Down here in the Coordinates in the Attributes panel, I'm going to change the X value to 0 and the Y value to 0. Now we need to extrude these paths with my null object here selected. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select Extrude NURBS. Nothing's happened yet. I need to go into Object and select Hierarchical. And now we can see our text is extruded. To break this up into pieces, we need to turn this into one object, one polygon object. So I'm going to right click and select Children. I'm going to right click it again and choose Make Editable. We're going to right click it again and select Children. Right click it again, say Make Editable. We're going to right click it again and select Children, and then we will right click it again and choose Connect Objects plus Delete. And now we just have one object here. To break it up into pieces, we're going to run a program called Thoraci. So go to Plugins, Thoraci. The only thing we're going to change on this is we're going to change the pieces from random to Verono. And we need to select how many pieces we want our logo to be broken up into. So for this particular project, I'm going to say 10. And since we have the Find Polygon Connection selected, it's going to break each letter into 10 pieces. And since we have 7 letters, we're going to have 70 pieces. Click Break Now. Okay, we can close Thoraci out. Now we have 7 fragment objects here, and if I twirl it open, you can see that there's 10 pieces in here. Now some of them have less than 10 pieces depending on how Thoraci broke it up. This one only has 9. We need to consolidate all these pieces into just one fragment object. So I'll twirl down this bottom one, and I'm going to just move these pieces into the top fragment object. And then I can delete this fragment object that I just removed those pieces from. And we'll just do that for all these fragment objects until we just have one. Okay, all the pieces are within this one fragment object now. We can delete the dynamics tag, and we want to enable the fracture object. Next, we're going to spread these pieces out throughout our project here. We're going to do that by selecting the fragment object, go to MoGraph, Effector, and Random. Down here for the parameter, let's increase the value for the X position, the Y position, and the Z position. Let's also enable rotation for the fragments. And if we go to the effector, here we can increase the strength greater than 100%. So let's start with the particles about there. We'll keyframe the movement of the particles. Holding down the control key, I'll select the icon next to strength. Come out here to about 90. And we'll bring the pieces together. I don't want them to come all the way back together. We might try 0.5%. Hold down control, select the icon again to set a keyframe. I'm going to go to 120 frames, set another keyframe so that they hold their position for about a second, and then I'm going to come out here to 180 frames, and we're going to increase this again, and I'm going to go well beyond 100%, so there's just a few fragments left here. And holding down control, I'll select the icon again to set a keyframe. Now let's work on being able to export the position data of all these fragments. Okay, if I open up the fragment object, and if I just select a piece here, and if we look at the coordinates, as I scrub through the timeline, even though the fragments are moving, the coordinates don't change. So we're going to have to use Espresso to be able to export the positional data of all those fragments. In order to do that, we're going to use a project file that I found online. If anybody knows who created this project file, please drop me an email. I'd like to give them credit. But this project file is called Clone Info Hierarchy. I'll drag that into our project. And I will turn off my random effector and my fracture object here just to take a look at the elements included in this project file. The nice thing about this is if I click on the matrix object, each time I add another clone, right here a new null is added with an external compositing tag already attached, so it's all ready to be exported to After Effects. So this is a really handy project file. It works great for exporting clone data from MoGraph outside of Cinema 4D. I'm going to go ahead and delete the matrix object and delete this random effector. This was part of the project file that we imported. Let me turn on my objects, and just by selecting the null here, I go to user data, and I'm going to drag our fracture object in there. And now that you can see here, we have a null attached to each fracture segment. So that works really well. If we look at the naming structure, we have extrude NURBS 7, thoracic 9, 0. For working with this data in After Effects, we don't want all the text that leads up to the number. We just want the number of the fragment here. So we're going to edit the Espresso tag just a little bit. Double click the tag. Select on the coffee node. And we're going to delete just one little section of this script here. Right here where it says name plus parentheses underscore. We just want to select that and hit delete. And now if I select the object panel up here, the name is dropped and all we get are the numbers. The next step is to go ahead and texture our logo, and I use Sketch and Tune. So let me import my material, and these materials down here were created by Thrasy. You can texture the outside and inside of your object if you would like. With my Sketch and Tune material, I'll just click through some of the settings so you can see what I have. So we're using strokes and some with a little bit of distortion on it. I'm not going to animate the distortion. Color is just black. Thickness, actually want to change the thickness, I think, to maybe 2. Let's go into the project settings and turn Sketch and Tune on. I just used the default settings. Let me do a quick render here. Yeah, they still look a little thick to me. Maybe go down to 1. Okay, that's not bad. I'm going to apply my sketch material to our fragment object. And by selecting the tag, I can go into shading and enable that. Under shading, I'm going to do a custom color. And I'm going to pick a color and try and get as close as I can to the 80 Tuts logo color. And we can further adjust it in After Effects. Let's do a quick test render. One last thing we want to do is I'm going to right click on my fracture object, and I'm going to go to Cinema 4D tags and select compositing. And I want to apply an object buffer to our fragments so that we can use the alpha channel of our logo for further compositing in After Effects. So I'm just going to enable buffer number 1, and we're ready to render this out. Let me show you my render settings really quick. So output, this is an HDTV 1080 2997 preset. I'm going to export all frames. Under save, I'm going to do a TIFF sequence for both my image sequence and for my object buffer. Okay, I'm doing 16-bit per channel, and we want to save a compositing project file for After Effects. Make sure you have include 3D data selected. Under multipass, we need to add our buffer channel number 1 over here. So I'll select multipass, object buffer, and it's already set at number 1. Everything else I'm leaving on their default settings. So let's render this out and work with the files a little bit more in After Effects. Okay, in After Effects, we're going to import the footage that we rendered out of Cinema 4D. Control I. You're going to look for the AEC file created by Cinema 4D. Double click it. And if we open up Cinema Fragments here, we have a comp already created by Cinema 4D, and in Special Passes, we have the alpha channel of our logo. So I'm going to open up the comp. As you can see, we have all of our fragments with a null attached to it. Okay, I'm going to select the first null here, scroll down to the bottom, select the last one, click S for scale, and change it to 10%, just so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. Also, I want to take our TIFF sequence that's at the bottom, and I want to move it to the top. That way we don't have to scroll through all these null layers to work with the footage. With my original project, I used a paper texture for the background, so let's import that. I'm going to put it on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and solo this for a moment. We're going to rotate it, scale it down a little bit. I want to remove some of this color. So let's remove the saturation. Let's adjust a little bit with curves. Let's go up. Okay, with our footage from Cinema 4D, I'm going to apply a transfer mode here. And let's go with darken so that now we can see the paper. Let's go ahead and duplicate our paper and put a copy on top. Okay, I'm going to remove curves from it, and we're going to change the transfer mode to hard light. Now to help bring the logo back out a little bit, let's apply actually curves. Maybe some saturation. And let's decrease the opacity of this top layer. I'm going to hold down Control-Shift-H so that we don't see the nulls for this moment. Okay, that looks pretty good. Next, let's work on adding our beam effect. So we need a new layer. Let's call it beam. I'm going to put it underneath our fragments. And let's go ahead and, well, let's not solo it, but let's apply the beam effect. You can see it back here behind our logo. So I'm going to just move the starting and ending point up a little bit higher so that we can see it. We want the length to be 100%. Let's change the color to black. Let's change starting thickness to 2 and the ending thickness to 2. Okay, maybe 2.5. That looks good. In my original project, I had it attached to a null that was moving around out here. So let's create a new null layer. And let's title this anchor. We don't see it right now. We need to hold down Control-Shift-H so we can see it again. It's right here. On the beam effect, we're going to attach the starting point to this null. So all the starting points will be attached to this null for all of our fragments. On beam, or let's back up, on the anchor, click P so that we can see the position. On the beam layer, we're going to hold down Alt and click the stopwatch next to starting point. And now we can pick whip it to the position and click enter. And now you can see it's attached to this null. Now let's attach the end to one of the nulls for these fragments. So what we're going to do is select the null 0, click enter, and we're going to title this AE Tuts. And we're going to click P so we see the position for this. Now the problem that comes up is the position for this null is a 3D position, and you can only use 2D position data for the endpoint. So we need to be able to convert the 3D position data into a 2D coordinate. So we're going to select beam and endpoint, and over here I'm going to type in 2D. So it's 3D to 2D coordinates. I'm not sure if that's the original name. That's what I've renamed it to. So I'll double click it, and we're going to get an error message right away. We just have to do one thing. So I'm going to select, with the beam layer selected, I'm going to press U. And right now, here's the expression, this comp layer, and it's looking for a layer called 3D underscore layer. We just need to change that to AE Tuts. Click enter. And now you can see the end position moved. So all you have to do is put the name of the layer that you want to be attached to right there. And if I scrub through, you can see that it's attached to the null. Okay. Now we have 68 nulls, and we're going to need 68 copies of this beam effect. So let's just start doing that. And there's kind of a little bit of a trick here. So I'm going to select beam, and I'm going to twirl it up. I'm going to click Control D. The trick with this now is for all the copies of the beam effect, we want composite on original selected. Okay. Now I'm going to duplicate beam number 2 again. Make sure you do not duplicate beam, the first beam effect. That one stays by itself because that one does not have the composite on original selected. All the rest of them will, but the first one does not. So I'm going to duplicate it and then select both of them. Select D to duplicate it. I'm going to select Control A so I can twirl them down. And remember, do not duplicate that first effect, only the copies. Control D to copy them. Control A, twirl them down, twirl them up. And we're just going to keep duplicating these until we have 68 copies. Let's see how many we have. Looks like we're at 65. So let's actually, we only need 3 more. Okay, 68 copies of the beam effect. Now, one thing that we have to do is if we twirl these open, we don't see anything happening in the comp window yet, because all these, if I select the beam layer and select U, you'll see that they're all referencing the AE Tuts null layer. So we need to rename all those AE Tuts so that they are 0 through 67. And the very first time I experimented with this, I did 250 layers, and I did not want to rename 250 expressions. So we're going to use Microsoft Word to help us rename where it says AE Tuts. We're going to have it replace it with a number. So I'm going to start here at the top. I'm going to skip our original beam effect, but I need to highlight all the beam effects from the first one down. So it gets a little tricky here. With those selected, I'm going to go to Edit and Copy Expression Only. If I jump over here into Microsoft Word, I can paste that data in. So here's all of our expression data from After Effects. I'm going to scroll to the top, and in Microsoft Word here, we're going to go to View and select Macros. And here's a macro that I found online, and is what it's going to do is every time, let's click Edit, we need to change this text right here to AE Tuts. So what it's going to do is every time it finds the word AE Tuts, it's going to replace it with a number. But it's going to be a sequential number. So right here we have n plus 1. So the first time it finds AE Tuts, it'll put in a number 1. The second time it finds AE Tuts, it'll put in a number 2, and so on. So it'll renumber it for us. So let me close out of these windows. And now that we've changed it to AE Tuts, I'll go back to Macro, and I'm just going to click Run. And it ran it already. As you can see, here's the last one that it changed, and that is number 67. That's how many we needed. So I'm going to select them all by selecting Control A, and then I'm going to copy it. I go back to After Effects, and I'm going to go to Edit and Paste. And now you can see right away we have all of our lines have updated, and now we have one line connected to each fragment from our anchor point here. Kind of cool. Okay, my original project, I had this null kind of moving around for the first half of the animation. So let's come here at 1 second and we'll select an anchor point. And we'll just start right here is fine. I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for position. Move out here a few seconds and maybe move it up here. Move over a few more seconds. Let's move it down here maybe. And then up here. I'm going to select all the keyframes and I'm going to change it to toggle hold keyframe so that it jumps from position to position. And then we can animate the position of it a little bit here. Let's see. Maybe have it move across. Let's actually turn this one. Actually, if we hold down Control on both of them so that it holds and then moves out like that. Okay, the next thing that I added a little dot right here at the anchor point here. So let's create a new comp. And let's just make it 500 by 500. And we'll just call it circle. We're going to use that same paper texture. Let's go ahead and scale it down. Let's do a new layer. And we can just make this a color. And let's apply a mask to it. Actually, let's do a transfer mode here. That'll work. And maybe even let's do an adjustment layer. You have to be able to spell. And maybe take the saturation down a little bit. Something like that. I'm going to go back to Cinema Fragments. And I'm going to bring the circle comp in. And we want it on top of our beam. Okay, but we want to make it a circle. So with the elliptical tool, I'm going to bring that up and double click it. Okay, now if we scale this layer down a little bit, we're going to make the position be the same as our anchor point. So click P for position, hold down Alt and click the stopwatch, and let's pick whip it to the anchor position. Click Enter. Okay, now this thing is moving around with our point. Okay, and the nice thing is, since we use transfer modes on our TIFF sequence, it's already keyed out for us. Okay, there's just one more thing to do. Let me show you something that I did in my original project. So in my original project, this point is moving around just as it is now. But after the particles come together and then move out, I actually attached the anchor point to one of the fragments so that it's kind of moving around, just to give it a little bit more motion. Okay, and this is pretty easy to do. is what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our cinema fragments comp and open up this copy. Now all we have to do is go in here for all of our beam effects and change this layer right here where it says this comp layer anchor transfer position. We just want to change that to one of the anchor points. Okay, so in order to do that, let's just scrub through here and find a fragment that we want to attach it to. Let's say that we want to maybe attach it to this one right here. I'm going to select all my layers by clicking Control A, and it's a little bit slow here. It's got a lot of layers, and I'm going to actually lock these top layers so that I can actually select this null right here and have it show up so I know which one it is. So it's layer 3. So I'm going to unlock my beam effect. Okay, press U, and I need to select all the beam effects so that we can copy and paste this into Microsoft Word or any text editor for this part. Okay, I'm going to go to Edit, Copy Expression Only. In Microsoft Word again, we're going to paste in our expression data. I'm going to scroll up to the top, and every time we come across this part of our expression, we want to replace it with our null number 3. Let me change the size of this window so you can see it a little better. I'm just going to do a replace. So find what? Now for the replace with, we can't just replace the word anchor with the 3 because our null layer number 3 is a 3D layer. So we're going to have to actually use this expression right here so that it gets converted to a 2D position point. So I'll paste that in, and we're just going to change a tuts here to the number 3. So every place where we have our 2-dimensional anchor null layer, it's going to get converted to our null layer number 3 along with this expression, so that since it's a 3D null layer, the position data gets transferred into 2D data. So I'm going to do replace all, and we get this message because I had just that little bit highlighted. Do we want to search the remainder of the document? Yes. Okay, I made 67 replacements. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to close. I'm going to do Control A to select it all, copy it, go back to After Effects, and if I go to Edit, Paste, okay, now we have our anchor being this fragment here, and you can see that it's following that. Okay, and all I did was create multiple copies of this comp and select different fragments for my anchor. So when it jumps around, when it's moving, it's just attached to different fragments in there. And we can reattach our circle. Okay, on our circle, we want the position. I'm going to click U. And I'm actually going to copy this expression right here and paste it into our expression for the circle. Okay, so now our circle follows it again. One last thing we need to do that I forgot to do on cinema fragment comp here. So let's go back to our original comp here. As the fragments come together, if we go in here to 100%, you can see that the lines are being seen through the text, and we want them to be hidden. We want it to look like the lines are coming from the back side of our logo here. So we're going to use our special pass, and if we bring this right above the beam layer, and let's turn it off, we want to use, on the beam layer, we want to set the track matte to Luma inverted. Okay. Now it's using this Luma mat. We're using the inverse of it to hide the beam effect. So now on the beam effect, we don't see the lines in the logo itself. They are hidden. So it looks like the lines are actually behind the logo. So we can come over here to Cinema Fragments and we can do the same thing. Put it right above the beam effect. Turn it off. We're going to set the track matte on the beam layer to Luma inverted. So when this one comes together, if we scroll in here to 100%, it's hidden as well. Okay, and that'll just help finish it up a little bit more. So make sure you remember to do that before you start duplicating these comps so that you don't have to do that for each duplicate comp. Take care of it all in this first one. Okay, and that's really all there is to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody comes up with this technique. If you use it, shoot me a link. I'd love to see what you come up with. I think there's a lot of potential for some interesting looking things using this workflow. So good luck and have fun.